The invitation arrived on thick cream cardstock with gold foil lettering. Clarissa and Michael, together with their families, request the honor of your presence. I held it in my hands at my kitchen counter in Portland, morning light streaming through the windows of my Pearl District apartment, and felt the familiar tightness in my chest that always came with anything involving my cousin. The envelope had my name printed in elegant script, Vanessa Hart, but when I looked closer at the inner card, I noticed something. No guest, no +1, just my name. Singular. Alone. I should have known then what was coming. I should have recognized the pattern. But family has a way of making you ignore your instincts, of convincing you that this time will be different. It never is. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My phone was already ringing before I'd finished reading the details. Aunt Tricia, Clarissa's mother, her voice bright with forced enthusiasm that I'd learned to decode over 3 decades. Vanessa, darling, you got the invitation. Isn't it gorgeous? Clarissa spent months choosing the paper stock. I held the phone away from my ear slightly, already exhausted. It's beautiful, Aunt Tricia. I noticed there's no +1 option. A pause, then a laugh that sounded rehearsed. Well, sweetheart, you know how expensive weddings are. We had to make some difficult decisions about the guest list. Clarissa wanted to keep it intimate, just family and very close friends. The implication was clear. I wasn't close enough to warrant a guest, despite the fact that I'd watched Clarissa grow up, babysat her when she was younger, helped her move into her first apartment. Despite the fact that every other cousin at this wedding would be bringing someone. I understand, I said, which was what I always said. The path of least resistance, the role I'd played since childhood. Don't make waves, don't cause problems, don't upset Aunt Tricia or Clarissa will pay the price. Except Clarissa never paid any price. I did. Wonderful, Aunt Tricia continued, her relief audible. The wedding is June 14th at the Sentinel Hotel. You'll need to RSVP by the end of the month. And Vanessa, Clarissa specifically requested that everyone dress formally. She's worked so hard on the aesthetic. She's calling it modern garden romance. I glanced at my calendar, calculating. June 14th was exactly 8 weeks away. 8 weeks to prepare myself for a day surrounded by my extended family, watching everyone else arrive in couples while I sat alone at whatever table they'd relegated single guests to, probably near the back by the kitchen doors. That conversation happened on a Tuesday morning in April, and I went to work thinking I'd handled it well, that I'd accepted the situation with grace and maturity. My office in the Silicon Forest area was buzzing with the usual energy, developers arguing about code, designers debating color palettes, the hum of a startup that was finally gaining traction after 2 years of struggle. I'd been with the company since the beginning, building our project management systems from scratch, and I was good at my job. Really good. It was the one area of my life where I felt genuinely competent, where my decisions mattered and my voice was heard. Keisha stopped by my desk around 11 with coffee from the good place downtown, the one that charged $7 but made it worth every penny. She took one look at my face and set the cup down carefully. What happened? The wedding invitation came. She knew immediately which wedding. We'd been friends since college, and she'd witnessed enough family gatherings to understand the dynamics. She'd coined the term the Clarissa show years ago, and it had stuck. Let me guess. No +1 for you, but everyone else gets to bring their significant others, their casual dates, probably their pets if they ask nicely. I managed a weak smile. Pretty much. Aunt Tricia called to explain how expensive weddings are and how they had to keep it intimate. Keisha sat on the edge of my desk, her expression shifting from sympathy to something harder. Vanessa, you know this is intentional. This isn't about budget or intimacy. This is about Clarissa making sure you feel less than. Like you always do at family events. I wanted to argue, to defend my cousin and my aunt, to explain that they didn't mean it that way. But the truth was sitting heavy in my chest, and I was tired of carrying it. I know, I said quietly. I've always known. The office continued moving around us, oblivious to the small moment of recognition happening at my desk. Keisha waited, giving me space to continue. She was good at that, at knowing when to push and when to let me find my own words. Growing up, Clarissa was the golden child and I was the cautionary tale. She was beautiful, outgoing, the center of attention at every family gathering. I was quiet, bookish, more comfortable with computers than people. Our grandmother Diane used to say we balanced each other out, but that was generous. What really happened was that Clarissa shone brighter when I stood in her shadow, and somewhere along the way, that became my assigned role in the family ecosystem. The shy one, the single one, the one who was doing fine but not spectacularly, not like Clarissa with her lifestyle blog and her perfect boyfriend Michael and her carefully curated life that looked like a magazine spread. The wedding planning consumed the next month in ways I hadn't anticipated. Group texts flew constantly, dozens of messages a day about flower arrangements and seating charts and whether the champagne should be vintage or just expensive. Clarissa had created a dedicated hashtag, Modern Gardenements, and expected everyone to use it when posting about wedding-related activities. Aunt Tricia appointed herself the communications director, sending daily updates that felt more like military briefings than family correspondence. There was a bridal shower scheduled for the first Saturday in May at Aunt Tricia's house in Laurelhurst, the kind of neighborhood where lawns looked painted and houses had names instead of just numbers. The invitation specified that gifts should align with Clarissa's registry, which featured items I needed a second mortgage to afford. Crystal champagne flutes at $200 each, imported Italian linens, a coffee maker that cost more than my monthly car payment. I settled on a set of absurdly expensive hand towels and tried not to think about my shrinking savings account. The morning of the shower, I dressed carefully in a sundress that Keisha had helped me pick out, something that said effortless but actually required significant effort. I drove across town rehearsing conversational responses to the inevitable questions about my dating life, my job, my plans for the future. The Hart family had a gift for making small talk feel like an interrogation, questions wrapped in concern that left you feeling somehow inadequate no matter how you answered. Aunt Tricia's house was already full when I arrived, women clustered in groups throughout the expansive living room and spilling onto the back patio where a catering company had set up elegant displays of finger foods and mimosas. I recognized most of the faces, cousins and aunts and family friends who'd known me since childhood. They greeted me with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for people you're supposed to love but don't actually know very well, air kisses and vague compliments about my hair or my dress. Clarissa held court in the center of the living room, perched on a white velvet chair that had been decorated with flowers and ribbons to create a throne-like effect. She wore a flowing cream dress that photographed beautifully. I watched her stop conversations multiple times to pose for pictures that would later appear on her blog. Her smile was perfect, practiced, the kind that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. "Vanessa," she called out when she spotted me, her voice carrying across the room. "You made it." I was starting to worry. I'd arrived exactly on time, but I smiled and made my way through the crowd to greet her properly. She stood and hugged me, the kind of hug that's more about the appearance than any actual affection, and I caught the scent of her perfume, something expensive and floral that probably had a French name. "You look nice," she said, her eyes scanning my dress in a way that felt like assessment rather than compliment. "Is that new?" "I bought it for today," I admitted, immediately regretting the confession. Her smile widened slightly. "How sweet. You shouldn't have gone to such trouble. Just family, you know." But she'd clearly gone to enormous trouble, from her professionally styled hair to her manicured nails to the dress that I'd probably see featured in a sponsored post next week. The difference was that her trouble was expected, celebrated, while mine was seen as trying too hard. The shower proceeded according to script. Games that infantilized grown women, forcing us to guess the price of diapers and compete in contests involving toilet paper wedding dresses. Clarissa opened presents with theatrical delight, holding up each gift for photographs and gushing about how perfect everything was. When she got to my hand towels, she paused for just a moment, her smile flickering. "Oh, towels. How practical. Thank you, Vanessa." Then she moved quickly to the next gift, something more exciting, more worth photographing. I stood near the refreshment table with a mimosa I wasn't drinking, watching the performance and wondering why I'd come. My cousin Bethany appeared beside me, pregnant with her third child and glowing with that particular smugness of the successfully married. "How are you doing, Vanessa? Still at that tech company? Still enjoying the single life?" The questions were landmines disguised as polite conversation. "I'm doing well. Work is good. Busy with a new product launch." "That's nice." She sipped her sparkling water, her free hand resting on her belly. "You know, my sister-in-law is single. I should set you two up. Maybe you could bring him to the wedding." Her voice dropped conspiratorially. "I noticed you didn't get a +1. That must be awkward." Heat crept up my neck. "It's fine. I don't mind coming alone." "Oh, I'd mind." Bethany laughed, the sound carrying just far enough for others to turn and look. Being the only single person at a wedding is basically announcing to everyone that you're unwanted. But I'm sure that's not how Clarissa meant it. She's just trying to keep costs down. Right. Costs. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As if my hypothetical guest would have bankrupted the wedding budget while Clarissa's photographer charged $5,000 for the day and her dress cost more than a used car. I excused myself and found the bathroom, locking the door and leaning against it while I tried to steady my breathing. The reflection in the mirror showed exactly what I felt, a woman who didn't quite belong, who was tolerated rather than welcomed, who took up space she hadn't been invited to fill. My phone buzzed with a text from Keisha. "How's the torture chamber? Surviving?" "Barely," I typed back. "Why do I keep doing this to myself?" "Because they're family and you keep hoping it'll be different. But it won't be. You know that, right?" I stared at her message, the truth of it sitting heavy in my chest. I did know. I'd always known. The pattern had been established decades ago and nothing I did would change it. Clarissa would always be the star and I would always be the background character, present but unimportant, noticed only when my absence might reflect poorly on family unity. When I emerged from the bathroom, Aunt Tricia intercepted me in the hallway, her expression bright and determined. "Vanessa, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about the rehearsal dinner. We've had to make some adjustments to the guest list." My stomach dropped. The rehearsal dinner was traditionally for the wedding party and immediate family. I wasn't in the wedding party. Clarissa had chosen her sorority sisters and Instagram friends for that honor, but I'd assumed immediate family meant me. "I'm afraid we can only accommodate the wedding party and parents at the dinner," Aunt Tricia continued, not quite meeting my eyes. "Space constraints at the restaurant, you understand. But we'll see you at the ceremony the next day, of course." The exclusion from the rehearsal dinner shouldn't have surprised me, but it landed like a physical blow. I drove home from the bridal shower in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly, my jaw aching from holding back words I'd never been allowed to say. When I finally pulled into my parking spot at my apartment building, I sat in the car for 20 minutes just staring at the dashboard, trying to understand why I kept subjecting myself to this treatment. Keisha came over that evening with Thai food and wine, her presence the antidote to the poison of the afternoon. She didn't say "I told you so," though she had every right to. Instead, she let me vent, let me cry angry tears into my pad thai, let me finally admit what I'd been denying for years. They don't actually want me there. I'm just an obligation they fulfill so they can claim they included everyone. She set down her wine glass and looked at me with an intensity that made me nervous. "So don't go." The simplicity of it was startling. Don't go? To Clarissa's wedding? Can you imagine what that would do? What would it do, Vanessa? Make them angry? They're already treating you like garbage. Make you the bad guy? You're already being cast as the pathetic single cousin. At least if you don't go, you'll have your dignity and your Saturday. I wanted to consider it, wanted to feel the relief of that decision, but 32 years of family conditioning don't dissolve overnight. If I don't go, I'll never hear the end of it. Grandmother Diane will be devastated. Aunt Tricia will tell everyone I'm bitter and jealous. Clarissa will make it into content for her blog about how some people can't handle other people's happiness. You're probably right, Keisha said carefully. So what if you went, but not alone? What if you brought someone who changes the entire dynamic? I laughed, but it came out bitter. That's the whole point. I don't have a +1. They made sure of that. I'm not talking about a date, Vanessa. I'm talking about bringing someone who reminds everyone exactly who you are and what you've accomplished. Someone whose presence forces them to see you differently. She had that look in her eyes, the one that meant she was 3 steps ahead of me in a plan I hadn't even begun to understand. The idea took root slowly over the next few days. I couldn't stop thinking about what Keisha had said, about showing up differently, about refusing to play the role they'd assigned me. But who could I possibly bring that would make any difference? I didn't have a secret boyfriend or a famous friend. My life was good but ordinary, successful but not spectacular, nothing that would register on Clarissa's carefully calibrated scale of importance. Then I remembered Dr. Leonard Brooks. I'd started seeing him 2 years ago when the anxiety about family gatherings had escalated into full panic attacks. He was the one who'd finally named what I'd been experiencing, that the relationships in my family followed patterns of narcissistic abuse and enabling, that my role as the scapegoat was assigned, not earned. He'd been encouraging me for months to set boundaries, to consider limiting contact, to stop attending events that left me feeling worthless. I called his office on a Tuesday afternoon, my heart hammering as I waded through the automated system. When his receptionist finally connected us, I pitched my idea so quickly I barely took a breath. Dr. Brooks, I know this is unconventional, but I need to ask you something about my cousin's wedding. There was a pause, then his familiar calm voice. Go ahead, Vanessa. What if I brought you as my guest? Not as my therapist, obviously, but just as someone accompanying me. Someone who knows the full history and can be there as support. Would that be completely inappropriate? Another pause, longer this time. I could hear him considering, weighing professional boundaries against whatever he heard in my desperation. Tell me more about what you're hoping to accomplish. So I told him everything. The pattern of exclusion, the deliberate isolation, the years of feeling invisible in my own family. I told him about the no +1 rule that somehow applied only to me, about being excluded from the rehearsal dinner, about how every family event left me questioning my worth. I told him that I was tired of being small, tired of accommodating cruelty disguised as preference, tired of walking into rooms where I was tolerated rather than wanted. What I need, I said finally, is a witness. Someone who can see what I've been trying to explain for years. Someone whose presence reminds me that I'm not crazy, that this treatment isn't normal or acceptable. I need someone in my corner who already knows the playbook so I don't have to explain or justify or defend myself in real time. Dr. Brooks was quiet for a long moment. Vanessa, what you're describing is a support system, which is healthy and important. The question is whether I'm the appropriate person to provide that support in a social setting. There are ethical considerations around dual relationships. I understand, I said, deflating. It was a stupid idea. I just thought, he interrupted gently. I didn't say no. I said there are considerations. Let me think about this and discuss it with a colleague. Can we talk about it in our session on Thursday? I agreed and spent the next 2 days alternating between hope and embarrassment. What was I thinking, asking my therapist to be my wedding date? Even framing it that way made me cringe. But Thursday came and Dr. Brooks surprised me. I've given this considerable thought, he said as I settled into the familiar chair in his office. And I've decided that in this specific circumstance, accompanying you to this event could be therapeutically beneficial. Not as a date, obviously, but as what we might call supported exposure therapy. You'd be confronting a triggering environment with professional support present. However, he continued, holding up a hand as I started to smile, there are conditions. We maintain clear boundaries. I'm there as your therapist providing support, not as a friend or date. We don't misrepresent our relationship to your family. If asked, you'll be honest that I'm your therapist. And we process this thoroughly before and after the event. I nodded eagerly, barely believing he was agreeing. Those terms are perfect. Better than perfect, actually, because you're right. I don't want to lie about who you are. I want them to know. I want them to see that I've needed professional help to deal with the damage they've caused. Dr. Brooks raised an eyebrow. That sounds like anger, Vanessa. Anger can be healthy when it motivates change rather than revenge. What's your goal here? The question stopped me. What was my goal? To hurt them the way they'd hurt me? To embarrass Clarissa at her own wedding? To prove something to Aunt Tricia? No, I realized. My goal was simpler and harder. I want to attend a family event and leave with my sense of self intact. I want to stop shrinking myself to fit into their narrative. I want to take up space I've been told I don't deserve. And I need help doing that because I've never been able to do it alone. The RSVP deadline arrived and I submitted my response through the wedding website Clarissa had created, complete with engagement photos and a countdown timer. Under the guest name field, I typed Vanessa Hart +1. The system accepted it before I could second guess myself. My phone rang within an hour. Vanessa, it's Aunt Tricia. I'm looking at the RSVP list and there seems to be an error. You've indicated you're bringing a guest, but your invitation was for you alone. I kept my voice steady, practiced the tone Dr. Brooks and I had rehearsed. There's no error, Aunt Tricia. I've decided to bring someone with me. I understand the original invitation didn't include a +1, but I'm letting you know now that I won't be attending alone. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its usual warmth and taken on something sharper. Vanessa, we've already finalized the seating chart. The catering numbers are locked in. You can't just decide to bring someone at the last minute. It's been 6 weeks since I received the invitation. That's hardly last minute. And I'm sure one additional guest won't derail the entire event. Clarissa has 200 people coming. That's not the point. The point is that we made it very clear this was family only, no random dates or casual friends. This is Clarissa's special day and we can't have it disrupted by strangers. He's not a stranger, I said, which was true in the most important ways. And I'm not asking permission, Aunt Tricia. I'm informing you that I'll be bringing a guest. If that's truly impossible, then I understand and I won't attend. The ball was in her court now, the choice between accommodating my request or dealing with the family gossip that would come from my absence. Another long silence, then a sharp exhale. Fine. One guest. But Vanessa, I need to know who this person is. For the place cards and seating arrangements. His name is Dr. Leonard Brooks. The title wasn't accidental. I heard her intake of breath, the recalibration happening in real time. A doctor? What kind of doctor? Is this someone you're seeing? I'm seeing him regularly, yes. We have standing appointments. Which was completely true, just not in the way she was interpreting it. I could practically hear her mind working, trying to fit this information into her understanding of my life. You're dating a doctor and you didn't tell anyone? I didn't correct her assumption. I kept my personal life private, Aunt Tricia. But yes, Leonard will be accompanying me to the wedding. I hope that's acceptable. The use of his first name was deliberate, creating an intimacy that wasn't false but also wasn't romantic. Dr. Brooks had been clear that we wouldn't lie, but he'd also acknowledged that people would make their own assumptions and we weren't responsible for managing their interpretations. Well, her voice had shifted entirely now, taking on an almost flustered quality. Of course that's acceptable. How wonderful, Vanessa. We had no idea you were seeing anyone. A doctor, imagine that. I'll update the seating chart right away. Will Dr. Brooks need any special accommodations? Just the standard place setting is fine. Thank you for understanding, Aunt Tricia. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone, adrenaline coursing through my system. I'd done it. I'd established a boundary and held it, even when pushed back against. It felt terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Keisha called 20 minutes later, laughing so hard she could barely speak. Bethany just texted me. Apparently the entire family is losing their minds because you're bringing a doctor to the wedding. A doctor, Vanessa. Aunt Tricia is telling everyone you've been secretly dating some brilliant physician. The narrative was already being written, I could hear it forming. Poor single Vanessa had been secretly dating someone impressive all along, not pathetic and alone after all, suddenly worthy of interest now that I came with acceptable credentials attached. The irony was almost beautiful. They'd excluded me for being single, for not fitting their image of success, and now they were falling over themselves to accommodate me because they'd made assumptions about my guest status. The fact that Dr. Brooks was successful and educated was irrelevant to why I'd asked him. I'd asked because he understood the dynamics, because he could help me maintain perspective, because his presence would remind me that my worth wasn't determined by their validation. But they'd never understand that, so they'd created a story they could understand instead. My next therapy session focused entirely on preparation. Dr. Brooks wanted to establish clear strategies for managing the various scenarios we might encounter. We role-played conversations, practiced grounding techniques for when I felt overwhelmed, and created exit strategies if the event became too toxic. He was approaching this with the same thoroughness he brought to our regular sessions, and I felt genuinely grateful that he was taking it seriously. One thing we need to discuss, he said toward the end of our session, is what happens when your family realizes I'm your therapist, not your romantic partner. That revelation will likely trigger a strong reaction. They may feel deceived or embarrassed. How do you want to handle that? I'd been thinking about this constantly. Part of me wanted to announce it immediately, to watch their faces as they realized they'd been courting and fawning over my therapist because they'd assumed he gave me value I didn't possess on my own. But that felt like revenge, and Dr. Brooks was right that revenge wasn't the goal. I think I'll be honest if anyone asks directly, I said slowly. I won't volunteer the information, but I won't lie if the question comes up. If they assume something that makes them treat me better, that says more about them than about me. He nodded thoughtfully. That's a mature approach. And what if they become hostile when they learn the truth? Then I'll remember that their hostility isn't about me or my choices. It's about their embarrassment at revealing their own values. They're upset that I matter more to them when I come with impressive credentials attached. That's their issue to resolve, not mine. The weeks leading up to the wedding brought a noticeable shift in family communication. Suddenly my phone filled with texts from cousins I hadn't heard from in months, casual questions about my life that felt like fishing expeditions. Aunt Tricia called twice under the guise of wedding logistics but really to extract information about Leonard. Even Clarissa reached out, her message dripping with false warmth and transparent curiosity about my mysterious doctor boyfriend. I kept my responses vague and pleasant, offering nothing that could be turned into gossip or used to construct a narrative I hadn't authorized. Keisha found the whole thing hilarious, texting me updates every time someone from my family tried to pump her for information. Your cousin Bethany literally ambushed me at the grocery store to ask if I'd met your doctor boyfriend. I told her he was very distinguished and left it at that. She looked like she was going to explode. The night before the wedding, Dr. Brooks called to check in. How are you feeling about tomorrow? Terrified, I admitted. But also strangely calm. Like I'm finally doing something I should have done years ago. Taking up space I've always been entitled to. That's growth, Vanessa. Remember, I'll be there with you. If at any point you need to leave, we leave. No explanations required, no apologies necessary. Your well-being is the priority, not their comfort. His words settled something in me, a reminder that I wasn't walking into this alone and unsupported. For the first time in my life, I was attending a family event with someone who was unequivocally on my side. The Sentinel Hotel was magnificent in late afternoon light, its historic architecture softened by the golden hour glow that made everything look like a painting. I met Dr. Brooks in the lobby, both of us dressed formally as requested. He wore a tailored navy suit that made him look distinguished without being ostentatious, exactly the kind of understated elegance that would photograph well but not steal focus. I'd chosen a deep emerald dress that Keisha had insisted made me look powerful, and for once I believed her. Ready? He asked, offering his arm in a gesture that felt supportive rather than romantic. As ready as I'll ever be. We walked into the ceremony space together, and I watched the ripple of awareness move through my family members as they noticed my arrival. Heads turned, whispers started, and I felt the weight of their attention in a way I never had before. But this time the attention wasn't dismissive or pitying. It was curious, reassessing, trying to reconcile the Vanessa they'd filed away with the woman walking in with a distinguished older gentleman at her side. Aunt Tricia intercepted us immediately, her smile so wide it looked painful. "Vanessa, darling, you look absolutely stunning. And this must be Dr. Brooks." She extended her hand to him with an eagerness that would have been comical if it weren't so revealing. "Leonard, please." He shook her hand with professional courtesy. "Thank you for accommodating the last-minute addition to your guest list. I know weddings require extensive planning." Oh, it was no trouble at all. Aunt Tricia was practically glowing now, already calculating how to work this into her social narrative. "Any friend of Vanessa's is welcome. We're just so delighted she's found someone so accomplished." She emphasized the word accomplished in a way that made my skin crawl, the implication clear that my value had just increased in direct proportion to his perceived status. We found our seats, which had been upgraded from whatever back corner table I'd originally been assigned to something much closer to the front. The place cards read Ms. Vanessa Hart and Dr. Leonard Brooks in elegant calligraphy, and I noticed we were now seated with Aunt Tricia's Bridge Club friends, the socially prominent crowd rather than the miscellaneous relatives section. The rearrangement spoke volumes about how thoroughly my status had shifted with the addition of one impressive-sounding title. The ceremony began and Clarissa made her entrance looking exactly as I'd expected, breathtaking and aware of it, her dress a confection of lace and silk that probably cost more than I made in 2 months. She glowed with happiness that seemed genuine, and I felt a pang of something that might have been sadness. We'd grown up together, played together as children, and somehow over the years we'd become strangers performing family for the cameras. Dr. Brooks leaned over slightly during one of the readings. "How are you doing?" "Okay," I whispered back. "Observing more than participating. That's healthy detachment. You're doing well." His quiet validation helped more than he probably knew, a reminder that my feelings and reactions were being witnessed by someone who understood their context. The ceremony concluded and we moved to the reception space, a ballroom transformed into Clarissa's modern garden romance vision with flowers everywhere and soft lighting that made everyone look beautiful. Cocktail hour brought the inevitable parade of relatives, each one finding an excuse to approach our table and meet the mysterious doctor. I watched Dr. Brooks handle each interaction with perfect professionalism, friendly but not overly familiar, answering questions without offering more information than necessary. My cousin Bethany appeared with her husband, her eyes sharp with curiosity barely disguised as friendliness. "Vanessa, you look amazing." "And Dr. Brooks, what kind of medicine do you practice?" "Psychology," he answered smoothly. "I specialize in family systems and relational dynamics." "Oh, how fascinating." Bethany's smile flickered slightly, perhaps sensing that the conversation might venture into uncomfortable territory. "And how did you two meet?" "Through my work," I said, which was completely accurate. "Leonard has been incredibly supportive during a challenging time in my life." I watched her process this, trying to determine if challenging time meant something romantic like a breakup or something more serious. Before she could probe further, Grandmother Diane arrived at our table. She was 83 and sharp as ever, her eyes missing nothing. She looked at Dr. Brooks for a long moment, then at me, and I saw recognition dawn in her expression. "Vanessa, dear, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" We stepped away to a quiet corner near the windows overlooking the city. Grandmother Diane took my hand in both of hers, her grip surprisingly strong. "That man is your therapist, isn't he?" I felt my face flush but held her gaze. "Yes, Grandma. He is." She nodded slowly, no judgment in her expression. "Good. I'm glad you're getting help dealing with this family. We haven't treated you well, especially Tricia and Clarissa. I've watched it happen and said nothing, which makes me complicit. I'm sorry for that." The apology landed unexpectedly, cracking something open in my chest. "Thank you," I managed. "That means more than you know." She patted my hand. "I won't tell anyone tonight." That's your story to share or not share. But Vanessa, whatever you decide to do after tonight, whether you keep attending these events or not, know that I understand. Family isn't supposed to make you feel this way. Go back to your therapist now. He seems like a good man, actually caring about your well-being rather than what you can do for him. I returned to the table with tears threatening, which Dr. Brooks noticed immediately. He didn't ask questions, just handed me his handkerchief and gave me a moment to compose myself. Dinner was served and the evening progressed through toasts and cake cutting and the first dance. I participated when required, smiled for photos when Clarissa insisted on family pictures, and maintained my composure with Dr. Brooks's steady presence beside me. Then came the moment I'd been simultaneously dreading and anticipating. Clarissa approached our table during a lull in the dancing, her cheeks flushed from champagne and excitement. She looked at Dr. Brooks with the calculating expression I knew so well. "So you're the famous doctor everyone's been talking about. I'm so glad Vanessa finally found someone worthy of her." The condescension in that statement was breathtaking, the implication that I'd been unworthy alone, that my value came from his presence. Dr. Brooks smiled politely. "Actually, I should clarify something. I'm Vanessa's therapist, not her romantic partner. I'm here today in a professional capacity, supporting her through what she anticipated would be a difficult family event." The silence that fell over our immediate area was absolute. Clarissa's expression cycled through confusion, realization, and then fury in the space of seconds. Her face flushed red and her voice rose sharply. "You brought your therapist to my wedding? As your date? You let everyone think you were seeing someone when really you're so pathetic you had to pay someone to accompany you?" The nearby tables had gone quiet, people turning to watch the scene unfold. I felt the familiar panic rising, but then Dr. Brooks spoke, his voice calm and clinical. "Clarissa, I agreed to attend because Vanessa has been experiencing significant anxiety around family events due to patterns of exclusion and emotional invalidation. Her request for support was clinically appropriate given the circumstances. The fact that everyone made assumptions about our relationship says more about their values than about Vanessa's choices." Aunt Tricia had materialized beside her daughter, her face pale with embarrassment and rage. "Vanessa, how could you do this? Making us all look foolish, leading us to believe you were bringing someone important when really you're just so desperate for attention that you had to create this spectacle at your cousin's wedding." I stood slowly, finding my voice and my courage in equal measure. "I didn't create anything, Aunt Tricia. You all created your own narrative because you decided I was worth more attention when you thought I came with impressive credentials. I brought someone who supports me, who understands the dynamics of this family, and who helps me maintain perspective. If that embarrasses you, perhaps you should examine why. The truth is that I've spent 32 years trying to earn a place in this family that I was born into, trying to be good enough and quiet enough and small enough to deserve basic inclusion. And you've spent 32 years making it clear that I'm only welcome when I'm useful or when I make you look good. Tonight you welcomed me warmly because you thought my guest elevated your social standing. That's not love, that's transaction." Clarissa's voice was shaking with fury. "Get out. Get out of my wedding right now. You've ruined everything with your drama and your pathetic need for therapy and your selfish inability to just be normal for one day." Dr. Brooks stood beside me, his presence grounding. "Vanessa, we can leave any time you're ready." I looked around at the faces watching us, family members I'd known my entire life, and felt a strange clarity wash over me. I was ready. I'd said what needed to be said, established the boundary that should have been set years ago, and there was nothing left here for me. I turned back to Clarissa one final time. "I hope your marriage brings you genuine happiness, not just the appearance of it. I hope you build something real with Michael, something that doesn't require performing perfection or excluding people to make yourself feel special. And I hope someday you understand that family is supposed to be a place where you belong without having to earn it." We walked out through the ballroom, past the shocked faces and whispered conversations, out into the cool evening air of Portland. Dr. Brooks waited until we were in the parking garage before speaking. "That took tremendous courage, Vanessa. How are you feeling?" "Like I just jumped off a cliff," I admitted, my hands shaking with adrenaline. "But also like I'm flying." Like I just freed myself from something that's been suffocating me for decades. That's an accurate assessment. You've just fundamentally changed your relationship with your family, and there will be consequences. But you've also honored your own worth, which is significant growth. 3 weeks later, I sat in Keisha's backyard with wine and sunset, processing everything that had happened. My phone had been silent from family except for grandmother Diane, who'd sent a brief text saying she was proud of me and that the family needed the wake-up call even if they wouldn't admit it. Clarissa had blocked me on all social media, which felt more like relief than rejection. Aunt Tricia had sent one blistering email calling me selfish and ungrateful, which I'd read once and then archived without responding. But something else had happened too. 2 cousins I'd barely known had reached out privately, sharing their own experiences of feeling sidelined and diminished in family gatherings. Bethany's sister had called to say she'd always thought the treatment of me was unfair but hadn't known how to address it. Even my uncle Gregory, Clarissa's father, had sent a brief message acknowledging that the family dynamics were complicated and that perhaps I'd been right to establish boundaries. Dr. Brooks and I had processed the wedding extensively in our sessions, examining my feelings and responses, celebrating the boundary setting while also acknowledging the grief of losing family connections, even toxic ones. You may find that some relationships repair over time, he'd said. People often need space to move past their embarrassment and recognize their role in harmful patterns. Or you may find that the distance becomes permanent, and that's okay too. You're not required to maintain relationships that damage your well-being. I'd started saying no to family obligations without elaborate explanations or apologies. When Aunt Tricia's birthday came around, I sent a card but declined the dinner invitation. When another cousin got engaged and I received a wedding invitation, I RSVP'd that I wouldn't be attending and felt nothing but peace about the decision. My life was expanding in the space that used to be occupied by family anxiety, filled now with friendships and hobbies and work projects that actually brought me joy. Keisha raised her wine glass in the fading light. To bringing your therapist to a wedding and accidentally starting a family revolution. I laughed and clinked my glass against hers. To taking up space I was always entitled to. To choosing people who choose me back. And to learning that sometimes the family you need isn't the one you're born into, it's the one you build from people who actually see you. The evening settled around us, comfortable and easy, and I realized this was what belonging felt like when it was real. Not performing or earning or shrinking, just existing and being valued for it. Clarissa's wedding had been the ending I needed, not of family entirely but of the version of myself that had accepted crumbs and called it love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.